Apple's massive earnings, Snapchat launches Discovery, and Newsweek's big cover fail. All that and more today on CrunchWeek. Hi there, I'm Colleen.
Hi, I'm Alexia.
Hello, I'm Kyle.
And we have some decorations here because this is a very special episode of CrunchWeek. Not only is Alexia joining us, but we also have 100 episodes in the can. This is our 100th episode. Do you remember our first episode, Alexia?
Was I on it?
You were.
Oh, what was it?
I think it was you and Lena Rao.
Oh,
and
was
me.
it about Lena leaving?
No, it wasn't even, because this was back in November 2012.
Yeah.
So that was our first episode, and we were all sitting here. The studio looked very different back then. But we all talked awkwardly, just like we're doing today. We've had a lot of real talk here on CrunchWeek, so it's fun to make it to 100 episodes. Let's dive into the first topic, which is Apple once again.
Yeah, no, big episode, big news. Apple has the biggest corporate earnings quarter of any company ever. $18 billion in one quarter. This makes out of the top 20 quarters of all time, they now have 5.
In terms of profits.
Yes. So 74.5 million iPhones sold. So quarters 2 and 3 of last year combined. 51% market share for smartphones sold last quarter in Japan. Huge boost in China with the phablets just kind of being a big thing, and they had not tapped that market at all beforehand. Kind of threw a lot of analyst expectations just like out the door. Like they're never the idea that Apple can't keep growing by just cornering the high end of the market. That's just like bunk now. Like 60 to 70% of phones sold were to people who had never bought a smartphone or were coming over from Android.
Right.
Like they still have way more room to grow if that's the case.
Right. In recent weeks, there's been a lot of buzz about Xiaomi and other companies like that, possibly taking a bigger chunk of China. And even here in the U.S., I know a couple people anecdotally who have bought Xiaomi phones just to try them out.
Well, I guess here in the Western world it would be like the OnePlus
It's
One.
like the most hipster thing to buy a Xiaomi phone. I think Matthew has like I don't know if he has the phone, he has a charger, but it's like, look at this. It's like even cooler than having an iPhone 6.
Right. Somehow it's like normcore.
Yeah, it's normcore.
It's
the
so
weirdest
cheap.
Hipster
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah.
But doesn't this happen with Apple every Christmas quarter?
Yes, no, the quote is basically every winter quarter they blew it out of the water, more iPhones sold than ever before. Because it's just like, honestly, it's not so much that demand, like if that's a question for Apple, the way Apple sees it is how much bigger can we make our supply chain? They're limited by how many iPhones can they make during the biggest quarter. And it's just they keep ramping that up. And like, it's really going to be interesting to see like which runs out first, their ability to keep getting bigger or demand actually like falling off for the iPhone.
Yeah, big week for Apple. Also an interesting week for Snapchat. The app looks pretty different right now.
I think Discover is the next Yahoo. Like it is really cool, and it's also quite strange, right? Like there's no Vogue on it, there's no New York Times, but the pubs that are on it, like Cosmopolitan, for example, have like, oh, I'm thinking about Cosmopolitan again, whereas I'd never think of it.
No, it was interesting also in that you go into it and you don't know what you're going to find. And I don't know, like I went into the Comedy Central app and saw a skit that I really liked, and I was like, okay, I'll watch another one. Oh, an ad popped up. Well, that's only a couple seconds. The next one, and it's just like watching cable TV, and that like you can kind of let it keep coming to you, and you're not hunting anything down,
right?
Which I think is interesting. But it's weird because you can't be like, oh, I really like this skit, now go find more of that kind. Like, oh, Key and Peele was really funny. Where's the next one? Like on Facebook or Twitter, it's like when something like that shows up in your news feed, you're like, you usually have instant access to go to comedycentral.com and find other stuff by them, or go to their YouTube channel. And with this, it's like there's constraints, but I feel like most people won't mind.
I don't think they'll mind. I think there was a huge halo effect. I think the terms for this I heard were crazy, like something like a 6-month commitment. In the Michael Linton emails, there's like 40% rev share on the ads. So really, and then that's probably why you don't see a Vogue. Anna Wintour is just sitting there, she's like, no, I'm not doing this. Yeah. But there were a lot of demanding asks from the Snapchat side. But still, the mindshare that National Geographic or even something like Vice is just retaining its coolness factor, but it got from this is tremendous. Like they just appealed to a whole new generation of consumers.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm excited about it. I'm using Snapchat a lot more because of it.
That's what I was going to say. This is one thing where an app has launched a new feature, a dramatically sort of different feel to the app, and it has not been a huge flop.
If they want to scale, they need to figure out how to get the noobs figuring out how to use the thing, because I have been using it for years and I still don't understand.
I never know what's going to happen. Every update's like, if I swipe right, what will be there? Let's guess.
It's always a surprise. They should call it surprise chat.
Right. Another big story from this week was Newsweek had a cover story about Silicon Valley and women in Silicon Valley, which is a pretty well-trod topic, but what really got a lot of people talking was the cover art that they used to represent the story.
Which, I know I just wrote something about how I did not like the cover art, but I do think that it's kind of unfortunate that that's what's getting talked about. You called it a fail earlier. I don't think it was a fail. I think they really, they weren't in print for a while. Newsweek needs to up its circulation. It's like 1.5 million right now, which is like, we're at 10x or around 10x uniques for comparison. They need to get attention. They're trying to figure out the internet. They're trying to differentiate themselves. And unfortunately, it ends up, and I don't know if they're savvy enough to understand this. I wish they were. It ends up in some pretty trollish behavior. Like the Dorian Nakamoto story, which I didn't bring up at all in my post because I thought it was poisoning the well. Like, it'd be so easy just to be like, you guys messed up on this story. I hate it when people do that. I think it's unfair. But that story was really not fact-checked enough. It was pushing to find Satoshi. I mean, we've been looking for Satoshi for 3 years. Biggs has been like on this story for a while. It's sort of hard to find him, and it was clear that this guy was not clear. Not if you read the Newsweek story, but if you talk to this guy, he's not.
Right.
He's not Satoshi Nakamoto. So I feel like that level of savvy and nuance was also used on this cover. The story's actually good. It's a fast follow. Like, I'm sure it's like women plus victimhood plus tech. I'm sure it's some kind of complex algorithm that equals page views or sales somewhere, because it's a trend. The New York Times is doing. Everyone's writing stories about this, which is good on one level, but on another level, it's reductive.
That's exactly the word that I would use for it too. It's very reductive, and it's very complicated, these issues, and every single path that every woman follows, in Silicon Valley is pretty unique, and there are a lot of details there that I think just gets reduced down to a cartoon of, a conventionally attractive woman in a red dress or something. As I think you said in your brilliant article, they're perpetuating the very thing that they're trying to mock here, but they're actually perpetuating it.
Well, and it's like, if the problem really was like the old-fashioned, like, misogynist boss chases his secretary around the desk, like, the issue would be almost easier to deal with. Like that, instead of the way we socialize being what leads to some of these issues, or the fact that like the engineering colleges have such high ratios of men to women, and that leads to like guys not being able to deal with women in the workplace once they actually have professional jobs. Like, there's so many like smaller systemic level issues that like just do not get factored in when you have something like, oh, a faceless woman like having her dress lifted up by an arrow. Like,
right. That makes it seem like it's so much more about sexism and it's like sexual advances and unwanted, advances but when it's not always about that. It can be insidious in small little ways that really have nothing to do with, someone actually coming on to a woman or checking out her butt in a skirt or something.
Not hiring, or when like looking at the screening process for hiring, thinking just like off the default, like thinking, oh, this male engineer is probably better at this like low-level programming than this woman candidate is.
Right.
Like, just little things
that need a neck beard or something.
Like really outdated misconceptions. You're right. It's purely people doing the same thing that they've always been doing, except that pattern was built in 1980 or 1990, and now we've got 50% of the population ready to be economically productive, trying to struggle through, ambitious enough because we're reading things like Lean In or we're looking at Marissa Mayer, and yet the structures in place to get us to the top of these companies or get us founding companies are not there. Like 6% of women are VCs, 10% of all VC funding is female. The one criticism that I've received that I think is very valid is like, why aren't you yelling at the VCs? Why aren't you yelling at these people? And I kind of agree with that. Like, I would like most of the VCs that high-five me on Twitter, like faved, I would like them to start hiring women. I know Mike Maples at Floodgate, he's like, we're 2/3 women or something. He's like, we hire women. And I know Kleiner hires women.
Yeah.
There are VC firms that have made inroads in this, and you know, at Kleiner it's caused issues because of the culture clash. But then there's other VCs like Sequoia that all the GPs are male.
Right.
And I don't want to pick on Sequoia because there's tons.
No, Dan Premack at Fortune has been sort of tweeting this out these past couple of days. You know, General Catalyst, I believe, has absolutely no investment staff that are female. I think it's Lightspeed or Lightbank, also absolutely no investment staff.
I don't think Khosla does. I mean, and I don't want to pick on any individual VC because it's all of them. And like, why would you include women? You have this culture. It's like we have that tech writers group where it's just like all tech writers, and we feel an affinity toward each other, and we all have the same things in common. We all wear the same shirts. Like we're just we're part of the same group. What if we went and got like a politics writer and put the politics writer in there? It wouldn't be the same flow.
Right.
And that's what they're thinking about with women, except you're sort of violating that subject-object thing.
Right.
Like by limiting a person's career advancement and life advancement in that way, you're really, you know, affecting their lives. And we've gotten to the point where that's unfair. So we need to start getting more women in there, and it's going to happen inevitably. We just need to do it faster, or we're going to be talking about this forever.
Really quickly, how would you illustrate the Newsweek cover?
I'm not gonna. I'm older and have evolved as a person, so I'm not gonna actually flip the bird, but
Okay.
exactly how I illustrated it in that post.
That
or
was-
Bryce illustrated it, but
That was fantastic.
we worked together on it.
Yeah. Well, that is about all the time we have. We've got to dig into this cake. So thank you for watching, and tune in next week.